Uncle Mark.
Yes.
You know, in this time of lockdown, one thing that I have been missing greatly is sushi.
Can I tell you something? Jesse and I, we ordered curbside from the greatest little sushi place in Salt Lake City, Takashi.
Oh, yeah.
They're still open and doing it. That was last night. Oh, my God.
I might do that tonight.
Miso soup nearly made me cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It did. I
hear you.
Much.
The mussel shooters, the quail egg at Takashi are the food. If I had to live on a desert island and only eat one thing, it would be those.
I don't know how well the quail eggs will do in curbside, but boy, what a treat! And it's so beautiful for them to be open. And,
but and since we're missing out on that, perhaps Uncle Dan can bring us some wisdom and love from the land of the rising sun to quell us.
Some flavor.
Yeah.
To quail us.
Look.
To quail us.
To quail us. That's right. Listen, we've looked at gods and religions from all over the world for this show. We've looked at Norse, Mayan, Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Hindu. We've covered everywhere.
Yeah.
But I realized I couldn't remember us ever venturing into the ancient power and wisdom of Japan. Now,
I don't think we have much. You did the horrible self-mummification thing, but I don't think we've drilled too far into the philosophical end of things.
Yeah. So, I figured, well, I'll just look into that. Now, I need to admit right from the top that before I started researching for this segment, I knew almost nothing about Japanese history. I knew a little bit about, like, World War II. I'd watched enough TV and movies to know something about emperors and important people called shogun and samurai, and that they were all saved by Tom Cruise somehow. Yeah. Matt Damon was apparently busy saving China. It was all just kind of jumbled up and confused in my head. I was equally clueless, or maybe more so, about Japanese religion. I knew that there was such a thing as Zen Buddhism, and that when I had visited the Zen Center here in Salt Lake for a fun little sesh, it involved sitting on the floor and chanting a bunch of words I didn't know from a little chant hymnal for what felt like 3 days, but was probably less than 20 minutes. And I knew that there was this religion called Shinto, and that was it. I knew it existed. That was about all I had. I mean, I knew slightly more than that. I mean, friends who have come back from Japan fresh with their new cultural learning have explained to me what had been explained to them, which consisted largely of this. Everybody practices both Shinto and Buddhism, and nobody has a problem with that. Shinto is about life, so your living ceremonies like weddings are Shinto ceremonies. Buddhism is about things beyond life, so funerals are all Buddhist. And that's about the extent of it. If you got the really good tour, you learned that Shinto had shrines and Buddhism had temples, and they're sometimes right next to each other. But what the hell is Shinto? What are the beliefs? What are the rules and moral codes? Who started it? What's the story, Kenzo Mori? There's a little Japanese-Canadian journalist joke there. I don't know. I'd really searched for that way too long.
People love those.
I used so much time to get that dumb joke. Anyway, here's the thing. One article I read described Shinto as, quote, prehistoric, which makes it sound like it's one of the most ancient religions in the world. And maybe it is, but how would we know? Because the thing is that the word prehistoric just means that the religion predates written history. And here's one of the facts that I only just learned doing research for this. Japanese didn't have a full-fledged written language until the 8th century CE.
Really?
What?
That's what I said. I was blown away. And about that written language, it was Chinese. Basically, the far more advanced Chinese ventured over to Japan from the mainland and were like, hey, check out these backwater country hicks. I guess we'll help them civilize themselves. So, after centuries of, doing business and whatever, the Chinese eventually taught some of the Japanese how to read their language. Then, eventually, the Japanese adapted the Chinese characters for their own purposes. So if the Japanese kanji, that's the written characters of their language, look like Chinese to you, that's because they are, in the same way that English is written using Latin characters, except for our nasty Arab numbers. So
What a mess.
yeah, it is. It's very interesting, but I had no idea that they had no writing until then. So all this is to say that we don't have any records from Japan that predate that time.
Not any written ones, right?
Right. Records, yeah, exactly.
Other archaeological stuff.
The earliest written history of Japan, the Kojiki, was put together sometime in the early 700s. For me, a guy who's used to talking about things that are claimed to have happened thousands of years before the Common Era, that feels like yesterday. So, what we have of Japanese history before then is, well, spotty. Written histories are often misleading and favor the viewpoints of the writer, but we can at least compare multiple accounts in the hopes of getting some sort of facts right. But oral histories are, well, let's just say that my family can't agree on whether Grandpa's famous turkey incident happened on Thanksgiving or Christmas. So I don't hold out much hope that a history passed down in a centuries-long game of telephone is going to be overly reliable.
Don't the police records say which one it was?
We just don't look at it anymore. It's
gotcha.
too painful for everyone involved. So, with all of that preface, let's talk about Shinto. The word Shinto is actually Chinese.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's a combination of Shen, and don't at me about my pronunciations of anything, which is the Chinese word for God or gods, and Dao, as in Taoism or the Tao Te Ching, meaning way or path. So it's the way of the gods. The reason it's a Chinese word is that before the Chinese showed up in Japan, they really only had this one religion, and everybody believed in versions of the same thing, so they didn't have to name it, but because there was nothing to differentiate it from. When the Chinese showed up, they had a few different religions going on. Confucianism was big, and so was Buddhism. So the Chinese needed a way to talk about what the Japanese people were doing religiously, so they named it the Way of the Gods.
It's like white privilege in Utah. I mean, why do we even need to put a word to it?
Right. It's just the way of things.
It just is.
Exactly. In Japan, the practice is sometimes called kami no michi, which is just the Japanese version of the same phrase, Way of the Gods. So, with that being the name, let's talk about the, quote, gods of Shinto. What we're talking about are known as the kami, and I don't think that God is the right word to really translate that to, though I'm at a total loss to come up with a better word. They're sometimes called spirits or holy powers or even just phenomena. A small number of kami have quasi-personified forms in some of the old stories, but they're usually not people, except that modern Shinto priests also sometimes totally anthropomorphize the kami, so I guess dealer's choice on that one. The kami are magic, for sure. They inhabit all kinds of things like mountains or trees or doorways or important people or roads or your ancestors. You just kind of stick them where you want them, I guess. They control weather phenomena like snow or tsunamis. But interestingly, unlike the gods of pretty much every other theistic religion I've read about, they're not beings that really establish a personal relationship with people. Unless they do. But they don't. I mean, sure, you might go to pray to a kami to ask for good luck when you're taking your final exams, but you don't expect much. Mostly, Shinto believers spend their time trying not to piss the kami off, because those shits are mean sometimes. Basically, you go to the Shinto shrine to show the magic spirits that you're nice and respectful so they don't drop a tree on your house, which they might anyway. Because here's the thing. Kami are not moral characters. They aren't good or bad. They just are. It's not good or bad that the kami of the tsunami just sent a huge wave that destroyed a bunch of stuff. That's just what the kami does. That's that kami. It's
They're
not a
just
moral
they're
judgment
indifferent.
that happened. That if you get a good rice harvest, that's not a moral judgment or whatever. That's just you're just glad it happened. You're glad that the kami of the rice helped you out this time.
Yeah,
and that's how it goes.
He was in a good mood today, but tomorrow, who knows?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's easy to piss these guys off and not easy. Like, you don't really get anything good out of them. You just hope for not bad more often than not. Now, all that said, there are some main mythological figures in the kami pantheon. Everything started apparently with Izanami and Izanagi. These are the creator kami. The islands of Japan were created, for example, when those two dipped a spear into the ocean and some mud fell off, and that made the islands. From there, they created everything else. Izanami, the female, though some say that they're actually genderless or two-gendered, but yes, for the most part, she's the female one. She gave birth to the fire god, which was careless of her because she was instantly burned to death.
Oh.
At which point she went on to the underworld, but her brother/lover, Izanagi, didn't want to lose her, so he followed her down there and found her in the darkness and said, "Hey, come with me." And she was like, "Cool, just, don't look back at me." And then they're walking and he does look, and she's covered in maggots, I guess because she's dead. And then 8 terrifying female kami emerge from her and start chasing him, and there's a big chase, and he keeps throwing food to them, and they keep pausing to eat it, which slows them down.
Story
and finally
took a really weird turn.
Right? And then he manages to get out of the underworld, slamming the door behind him so that they couldn't get out. And then he washes himself in the ocean because purification is very, very, very important in this religion. Now, does that sound like it has echoes from Greek mythology in it or ancient Chinese? Is it possible that other people's stories got mixed in? Well, duh. This is what happens when you don't write down your own shit. Other people's shit gets mixed in, and then you've got a jambalaya of nonsense. Anyway, Izanagi at some point gave birth to the sun goddess Amaterasu. God damn it. These are hard. But wait, wasn't Izanagi the male? How could he give birth? Well, yes, smartass, he gave birth to her out of his eye, so there's no need to make it weird.
Ah.
Oh.
So, and Amaterasu is a super important kami because she was the mother of all the other kami. She's the sun god, she's the goddess of the sun and the universe, and basically everything important. And, oh, by the way, all of the emperors descended directly from her, which is why you're not supposed to question them or ever wonder if they're really all that special, because they super duper are. So maybe that is the point that makes Shinto a religion. Maybe the primary function of a religion is that one group can use it to subjugate another. I'm not going to get into Japanese political and military history, but Shinto has been used by the ruling classes as a way of quelling dissent on and off for a minute. But here's the thing. Other than some undefined ideas about nondescript spirits that may or may not care about you and your needs, there's not much to Shinto. There are no doctrines, no rules or moral codes to live by, no supreme or divine edicts or ways of conducting oneself. There's really not much to make it a religion at all. It barely goes beyond just basic observation of the world and nature. And as a matter of fact, I'm hard-pressed to see what the point of it is beyond kind of giving folks something to do. It's like the Japanese took their observations and applied the human evolutionary mechanism of agency detection, but then didn't apply the human need for it to mean anything, which I think is kind of cool. They basically just like, the commies, huh? Right? Am I right? And that's about it.
Well, it's so funny, because you were saying about how it's been used in society, because when I was doing research for some segments a while back about 20th century dictators and, religion versus atheism, I was looking at the Japanese, the Imperial Japan in the Second World War, and they kept, the articles kept talking about how Shinto was instrumental in this kind of belligerent idea of Japanese nationalism.
Right.
I'd be like, oh, okay, great. What about Shinto enabled that? And I kind of couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, it did.
It was mostly because when the Japanese emperors came back, that's what they hinged it on.
That's where they claim their divine right.
We are descended from this sun goddess, and therefore we deserve this. This is ours, or whatever.
Are you saying that worshiping another human being as potentially divine could have bad outcomes?
It can if it's not me.
Right.
If you worship not like everybody else is bullshitting, I'm actually divine, so it's fine to worship Uncle Dan, not everybody else though.
Gotcha.
You're divine. Actually, I think we're talking about the kind of 80s club celebrity culture phenomenon, divine the drag persona.
Yeah, that's
and
me.
John Waters regular. Yeah. Awesome. I love it.
Divine
I've seen
handed that mantle down.
I have seen Uncle Dan in drag, and I didn't hate it.
That's true.
Yeah.
We both have.
Everybody's seen Uncle Dan in drag. I've been in drag than it's very silly. I've been in I've done drag a lot. Anyway, that's it.
Oh, that's interesting.
That was my introduction to a religion that I'm not 100% convinced is an actual religion.
Well, that's a first on our show.
Yes,
so,
indeed.
So get Shinto, everybody. It can clearly mean whatever you want it to.
Let's put them on the list.
Yeah, put it on the list. All right, let's move on.